Adding a pantry to a kitchen, no matter the size, the type, the shape, the accessibility, the features, is a coveted and sought after item in any kitchen renovation. Starting with the smallest options, which I consider to be single door pantries between 9 and 21 inches. My rule in kitchen functionality is, when possible, have it come to you. In the case of a pantry, when possible, have the storage come to you. This is especially important in narrower units because of constrictive widths. And oftentimes pantries are installed against a wall or against a fridge which has a depth greater than the pantry cabinet itself, making it challenging to access. Some of the best options for these pantries are standard narrow pull-out units. Once the pantry gets to about 18 inches, I prefer then to use individualized pullouts. This helps with weight distribution, as the narrow pullouts are pulling everything you own in the pantry out, and over time that will cause some issues with the hardware system. There's lots of variety with these types of pullouts. Everything from a solid wood construction to adjustable wire shelving and wire racking. You'll want to choose something that's attractive to you and meets your needs. One thing to note when you're looking at these pull-out systems is to try to find ones that utilize the entire height of the pantry cabinet. Being narrow makes it that much more difficult to access the top portion of the pantry, which is already inherently difficult to access. So by including this space in the pull-out feature, you're making your narrow pantry 100% efficient. Be careful when adding a dovetail wooden box pull-out to a narrow pantry. By the time you install the hardware and you have the dimensions of the box itself, the actual pull-out becomes really narrow and almost too narrow to be efficient and functional. That's why I mentioned that anything over 18 inches is great for individualized pullouts, and anything under that is really suitable for the single pullouts that sometimes attach to the door or just pull out as one single unit. Another possibility for these narrower pantries is to utilize that space for utility, such as a broom closet / vacuum storage, or storage for other cleaners, or possibly even a ladder. Plus, there's creative ways to store pots or spices in these pantries, and a little look on Pinterest or even TikTok can give you a variety of ideas that you can use this space for. Next are the wider pantries, anything between 24 and 36 inches wide. Be careful going any wider than this, as the door size also gets wider, and it's probably going to be more susceptible to warpage over time the wider the cabinet is. The possibility of storage and functionality increases greatly the wider we go, because we are incorporating more space. But the same rule applies as in the smaller pantries. When possible, make sure the stuff comes to you. That'll make it the most functional. At the very least, it's important to include the basic full extension pull-out shelf in this category of pantry. How many pullouts is up to you, but I do suggest filling the space with 4 to 5 pullouts depending on the height of the pantry, and making them adjustable if possible. For lots of people, stopping around 5 feet off the floor is a good height, but of course this depends on your height. The key takeaway is to put as many pullouts in that pantry as possible so that everything you store can be easily accessed and come out to you, so that it is more functional. When it's a full extension glide, you're able to pull out the whole drawer box so that you can kind of keep an eye on the things that are buried in the back of your pantry. Because one of the things with pantries, especially when they're not accessible, is that you lose things in the back of them. You end up rebuying and buying things that you don't need, wasting food, wasting things, because you can't see what's going on inside the back of that space. And with a wider pantry, although you are losing a little bit of space because of the hardware and the box dimensions, it's marginal in comparison to what you're gaining in overall access and storage capabilities. And I recommend at this size, and all sizes, that you pay attention to quality. But the wider you go, the more weight generally is going to be distributed upon those rails, and you'll want to make sure that you have a rail system that is of good quality and is tested for a high rating. I recommend Bloom tandem undermount drawer glides, but there's lots of them out there that you can check out. But be sure that they test for at least 75 pounds per rail or above, to make sure that whatever you do store in that pantry is not going to fall on the floor one day and break your toes because the rail system couldn't handle it. One thing to consider with these wider pantries, as in the narrower ones, is the top portion of the pantry. The top portion of the pantry is one of the most unusable, inaccessible, inefficient spaces in a kitchen. So to remedy that, there are a few suggestions. One, you can include a wall pull-down unit. Do a little digging and you'll be able to find ones that fit in cabinets for above a fridge, and the same would go for above a pantry. It makes that portion of the pantry more usable and more functional. Now, although the mechanism itself takes up quite a bit of space, it allows you to bring things down to you and use that space more efficiently, so I think it's a pretty good trade-off. Other things you can do though is create a wine rack or a tray divider system, or even create a shallow depth shelf on top of your pantry so that you just don't have that depth to deal with. Yes, you're wasting space in the back, but if you follow me for any length of time, you'll know I don't think it's that big a deal to waste the most inconvenient space in a kitchen. So above your pantry, if you wanted to create something that was shallower, that was easier to access, I'm all for that. And pantries of this width can also accommodate small appliances such as a microwave or larger appliances like a double oven. Now, of course, we're getting into a bit of a crossover in the cabinet type. However, it still can technically be used as a pantry because there's still lots of storage in units like that, especially if you're just using a small appliance. So don't be afraid to mix and match these types of things together if you want to utilize a lot of storage, but you need a place for your microwave or maybe your steam oven or some other inserted appliance that will fit in a cabinet of this size. Go ahead and do that and utilize the rest of the space accordingly like a pantry. Now, whether it's a narrow pantry or a wider pantry, there are some guidelines that I like to follow when including a pantry in any kitchen layout. And the first is pretty simple. Don't block a run of counter space. Don't put a pantry unit, or any tall unit for that matter, right smack dab in the middle of a nice run of counter space, breaking the kitchen off into basically two sides. This is not advisable. One, it normally never looks that great, but also you're just interrupting the flow of the workspace. Whenever you can, put a pantry on an end of a run, on an end wall, next to other tall appliances, somewhere where it's not obtrusive, which is my next guideline. Consider putting all the tall items together. This is not a rule, and it's a guideline that you can loosely follow. Generally, putting taller items together in some place in your kitchen is advisable for a couple of reasons. One, it helps you not to break rule number one, which I just mentioned. And oftentimes the storage zone with the fridge and the pantry makes sense being in one location. This one's a little more detailed, but I think it's important to mention. If you have a pantry that has countertop running into the side of it, I suggest increasing the depth of the pantry so that the countertop can butt really nice and flush into that side of the pantry and not stick out past it. It's a minor detail, but it just adds that little bit of professional installation layout detail. I think it's a nicer finish, and it helps your door not bang into that little nub of countertop that sticks out past your pantry door. Always leave room for a filler strip if your pantry is against a wall. And you know why? Because your wall's probably not square, plumb, and level, nor is your floor. Maybe your pantry cabinet even isn't square, plumb, or level. You need to make sure that you have wiggle room, but not only for that reason. Some pantries have 110-degree hinges, some have 150-degree hinges. So when you're opening that door, and if it opens into the wall, you have to have enough room, or at least provide enough wiggle room so the door isn't, one, banging into the wall, creating a mark in your drywall, or not having enough space for that door to open so the pullouts do not pull out properly. And if everyone in the household is using the pantry or needs access to the pantry, my rule for pantries is also the same as my rule for refrigerators. Try not to bury it within the workflow of the kitchen, so that when people do access the refrigerator and the pantry, they're not getting in the way of the cook or all the other things that are happening in that space. The more accessible and functional the pantry is for everyone who wants to use it, the more functional and accessible your kitchen's going to be. And much more of a joy for you to use, not being interrupted by people trying to get to the chips or whatever. Now, the next type of pantry is basically a room. A walk-in pantry, a butler's pantry. Another room where you store things, which you can have basically everything from a wire rack shelf to a whole other kitchen. This will likely be another video in the future where I just talk about different ways that you can lay out a butler's pantry or a walk-in pantry. But for now, just some general guidelines on what you should be considering if you have space or a room for a walk-in pantry. Because the design opportunities are basically endless with a walk-in pantry, these guidelines are very generalized, but things that should help you figure out the best use of that space. Number one is lighting. As with your kitchen, as with your regular pantries, there should be ample lighting in that space so that it's obviously bright and easy to work in. Walk-in pantries give you the opportunity to utilize shallow storage. Depending on the room layout, depending on the size of the pantry, you can look for these areas. Shallow storage is awesome because You don't need any extra pullouts. Everything is on a shallow depth shelf. It's easy to grab, it's easy to see, it's easy to store things, it's easy to organize stuff. Having shallow storage, I think, is a game changer in that type of pantry space, which of course leads me to open storage. I'm not a huge fan of open shelves and floating shelves and those types of things, just for the dust reasons and the cleanability and the aesthetics of it. It has to be curated and kept looking nice if you're, of an OCD persuasion. But inside a walk-in pantry, you have this great opportunity that you don't really need doors because it's closed off anyway by one major door, and everything inside of there doesn't need to be super neat and tidy all the time. And don't forget about bulk storage. We get consumed with trying to make the walk-in pantry look aesthetically pleasing, and I would say abandon that idea for a walk-in pantry. I know, for you interior designers out there, we see the pictures, we see the Instagram shots, we see these beautiful walk-in pantries, but listen, when you close that door, you're never gonna see that. That's just a picture on Instagram or wherever. When you're thinking about bulk storage inside of a pantry, usually it's not pretty. It's a place to store bulk items. So just consider that when you're designing the layout of the types of cabinets that you're thinking, okay, how can I also store bulk items? Which for many of you who like to bulk shop, this can be very beneficial. Think about decluttering. Although they're behind a closed door, although you can store bulk items, although everything is accessible and easy to get at, having it cluttered in a huge mess isn't going to be efficient or functional either. So always be thinking of decluttering things that don't get used, cycling out things that you can donate or get rid of that really are just wasting space. Which leads us to the next portion, which is organization. Organization inside of a butler's pantry, a walk-in pantry, can be a nightmare because, again, the stuff I'm telling you is throw the things in there. You got the open shelves, you got the shallow shelves, you got the bulk items, but that doesn't mean it needs to be cluttered or unorganized. So think through how you're going to organize that space as you're designing it so that it is more efficient and more functional. And if you can add counter space inside a pantry like that, it's definitely advisable. It gives you more prep area, more work surface, and it's a great place to use and store small appliances. One of the most popular services I provide is a one-on-one consultation where you and I get together over Zoom. We talk about your specific kitchen, your questions, your problems, the details of your renovation so that you can be confident going forward with the big decisions that you'll need to make for your kitchen renovation. There's a link in the description below. Check it out if you're interested. I'd love to chat with you. I hope this video was helpful. If it was, give it a thumbs up and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.